Kenwood Sports Media. I told y'all some keep y'all updated on the LSU coaching job. Well, it's official. LSU has hired Brian Kelly, formerly coach of Notre Dame. He also coached at Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati Bearcats. At Cincinnati, he had a record of 34-6. He had a huge winning record at Notre Dame. Overall, I think he has over 284 wins, more wins than any active coach in the country. More than any of these coaches, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, more than any of those guys. But the one thing that Brian Kelly hasn't had over those guys is a team with resources like LSU, a team with recruitment like LSU. And already one of the biggest things that he's done since November 30th, the day he was officially hired and introduced as LSU's new head football coach, he retained Corey Raymond, which is the DB's coach for LSU, the corners, the safeties, all of that. He's also the recruiting coordinator for LSU, so that's big. You're keeping a recruiting coordinator in place who just recruiting under Ed Orgeron. Ed Orgeron, if y'all don't know Ed Orgeron, one of the best recruiters in the nation. He got best recruiter of the year. I think that's when he was at USC. He's been in coaching for 37 years, so a lot of guys been recruited by Ed Orgeron. So Corey Raymond worked under Ed Orgeron, so whatever knowledge and experience he had as a coordinator, I'm pretty sure that was enhanced working with Ed Orgeron. Now, Brian Kelly. Now, before Brian Kelly was announced as the head coach, it was a lot of talk about Lincoln Riley becoming the head coach at LSU. And when I hear a certain name, I think about the person, I think about the personality of the person. Because Louisiana, it takes a certain person to fit in a position of a head coach in Louisiana sports, specifically LSU and the Saints, because the fans, the cities, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, just the whole state, you got to be a certain type of guy to be accepted by some Louisiana people, period. And I looked at Brian Kelly, and I always looked at him and said to myself, this guy looked like he does things his way and his way only, and he do it with an attitude. But at the same time, he looked like a CEO type coach that come to work and handle business, take care of business, a real leader, got people that want to work with him, want to be around and be under his leadership. When I looked at Lincoln Riley, I said, okay, this is a young guy, got a good coaching record with 55-10 since becoming the head coach at Oklahoma. I looked at him and I said, man, I don't know if it's a real fit. The same way I looked at Tom Herman, who came from Ohio State and became the head coach at Texas a few years back. LSU was trying to get him. So Brian Kelly, after seeing his interview, after seeing a couple of the moves that he made, I knew he was a winning coach because I always see Notre Dame play, and I know they win more than they lose. But LSU is a whole nother level of talent, a whole nother level of recruitment, a different part of the country. Notre Dame known more for their academics than anything. Being a prestigious university, you go there, you're going to get a great education, you're going to be a part of a good sports program, things of that nature. Now he's in the SEC. I seen his welcome press conference. He mentioned being in the SEC now, having some of the best players in the best conference, and you can tell he genuinely meant what he was saying about that, because all that rings true. I say it all the time. LSU gets some of the best players in the country. If LSU not having success on the field, it's because of the coaching, it's because of the leadership. And I'm gonna say this is the biggest coaching hire LSU has ever had. Because I say that because yes, we hired Nick Saban, but Nick Saban wasn't who he was before LSU hired him. He hadn't had that many wins. He got most of these wins at Alabama because he's been in Alabama since probably 05 or something like that. No, he left us in probably about 06, yeah. So he's been with Alabama probably since 07 or 08, I'm gonna say. It's somewhere around in there. He been with Alabama that long. I don't know how long he was at Miami, but I know in 2009, matter of fact, in 2009, Nick Saban played against Brian Kelly in the last, it probably was the last BCS national championship, maybe one of the last. Notre Dame versus Alabama. Brian Kelly, they got blew out like 42-14. Still in all, they was good enough to be in that championship game. With his coaching, his cachet, I'm gonna say his cachet, like the rank that he got, the clout that he got as a coach, the resources that he have, coaching at Cincinnati, coaching at Notre Dame, being successful, having a large sum of wins. A lot of guys, a lot of people is on board with Brian Kelly as far as wanting to work with him, seeing his success, knowing that he's a successful coach and what he brings to the table. I feel like he's a stern coach. He gonna make sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to be doing it. Like I told you, it's a CEO, Fortune 500 type mindset, and that's the type of coach LSU really need. Nick Saban is that type of coach. Bill Belichick is that type of coach. Urban Meyer is that type of coach. Brian Kelly, I put him in that same category. He may not have the championships that those guys have, but the same type of coaching pedigree. When it comes to winning, he got more wins than any of those guys. I ain't gonna say Bill Belichick, but in college, more active wins than any of those, any coach right now. That includes Nick Saban. I have to see how many exactly it is, but I think it's probably only about 10 or 15 wins. I did look that up, but Brian Kelly, I think it's a good hire. I honestly didn't think of him at all when I thought about getting a coach for LSU. But I think this is the guy that's going to bring LSU back to prominence. We had 2 500 seasons back to back. I think 5-5 and 6-6 this year. We're going to actually get that bowl game this year. I don't know who it's going to be against, but it's going to be a lower level bowl game. But at least the season get to be extended for another game. I'm excited about what he's going to do. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but he was 3-time National Coach of the Year. And you got to think about it. If somebody got more wins than any coach in the country right now, he had to be had a Coach of the Year at least one time, and he's had it 3 different times. I think 2009, which is the year he played Alabama in the championship, 2012, and 2018. A lot of good players that came out of that. Notre Dame got a lot of good history, a lot of good football players, and Brian Kelly, he's been there for over 10 years, I believe. I believe it is, yeah, since probably like 2009, 2010. Somewhere around there. He's been in there for a long enough time to build up a lot of wins. And I think he's going to be a good fit for LSU. So he's got started. He did his press conference with the team. A lot of guys got to get back on board with as far as the recruiting. Now that you know with the head coach, that's going to change a lot of things as far as the recruiting. So I expect big things coming from LSU, and I expect Brian Kelly to make a big difference in LSU football.